Have you ever wondered what secrets people who take care of us every day keep? Rosa had been working for 15 years in the mansion of a billionaire widow in San Miguel de Allende. She was discreet, dedicated, and had a sad smile that no one could decipher. One day, while organizing the library books, he asked her a question that would change everything. "Rosa, why did you never want to get married?" The silence that followed was so deep that the air seemed to stop. What she revealed in that moment broke his heart into pieces and transformed their lives forever. Stay until the end to discover how the most unexpected love was born from the deepest gratitude. Rosa was 52 years old when that October afternoon changed her life forever. She had arrived at Don Miguel's mansion in San Miguel de Allende when she was barely 37, with hands calloused from hard work and a heart locked tight. For 15 years, her steps resonated through the marble hallways with the same discretion with which she breathed. She cleaned every corner as if it were a sacred altar, cooked with the love of someone preparing food for their own family, and kept silent like one protecting treasures that no one should discover. Don Miguel, a 58-year-old businessman who had lost his wife Elena 5 years prior, observed Rosa with a curiosity that grew day after day. There was something about that woman that intrigued him deeply. It wasn't just her impeccable efficiency, nor her unwavering dedication. It was that sad smile that crossed her face when she thought no one was watching, that distant look that seemed to search for something in a faraway past. Rosa never talked about her personal life, never mentioned family or friends, never asked for days off beyond Sundays to go to Mass. She lived for that house, for the widower who sometimes looked at her with so much respect that she felt like crying. That October afternoon, the sun streamed through the large library windows, creating golden patterns on the antique wooden shelves. Rosa was organizing the books that Don Miguel had left in disarray after a night of sleepless reading. Her hands moved carefully between the yellowed pages, tucking each volume into its exact place. The library had always been her favorite space in the mansion, where the smell of old paper and the silence made her feel at peace. Don Miguel entered quietly, watching her work with that characteristic concentration. He stood in the doorway for several minutes, struggling against a question that had been in his mind for years, but that he had never dared to formulate. Finally, he cleared his throat softly so as not to startle her. Rosa turned around, surprised to see him there in the middle of the afternoon when he was usually in business meetings. "Good afternoon, Don Miguel. Do you need something?" she asked with her soft voice. Always kind, always ready. Miguel walked toward one of the leather armchairs and sat down, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that Rosa had never seen before. The silence stretched between them like a tight rope about to break. "Rosa, I have been watching you for years," Miguel began with a calm but firm voice. "You are a beautiful, hard-working woman with a noble heart that shows in everything you do. You are barely 52 years old. You are still young, and yet you live here alone, with no family visiting you, with no one waiting for you when you go out on Sundays." Rosa felt her heart begin to beat faster, sensing where that conversation was headed. Her hands gripped the book she was holding so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Miguel leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his penetrating gaze searching for her eyes, which now fled toward the floor. "During all these years, I have never seen you with anyone. You have never mentioned suitors. You have never asked for permission to go out with someone." Miguel's voice softened even more, filled with a genuine tenderness that made Rosa feel a lump in her throat. "Rosa, please tell me, why did you never want to get married?" The question hung in the air like a feather falling slowly, inevitable. Rosa felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. The silence that followed was so heavy that Miguel almost regretted asking. He watched as Rosa placed the book on the shelf with trembling hands, as her shoulders tensed under the simple uniform she wore every day. She turned around slowly, and when she finally looked at him, Miguel saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Tears held back for 15 years, pain stored in the deepest part of the soul, buried stories begging to be told. Rosa opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She tried again, and only managed to emit a shaky sigh. Miguel stood up, took 2 steps toward her, but stopped, respecting the distance that Rosa seemed to need at that moment. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," he said softly. Although everything in his posture pleaded for her to speak, Rosa shook her head, quickly wiping away a tear that had escaped without permission. "No, Don Miguel," she murmured with a broken voice. "You have a right to know. After everything you have done for me, after all these years under your roof, you deserve to know the truth." She breathed deeply, searching for strength in some remote part of her being. "What I am going to tell you will change everything you think you know about me." Rosa walked toward the library window, needing to put physical distance before opening the floodgates of her past. She rested her hands on the polished wooden frame, looking out at the garden where the jacarandas were beginning to drop their lilac flowers. Outside, San Miguel de Allende shone with its colonial colors under the October sun, as beautiful and calm as ever, oblivious to the emotional earthquake about to break loose inside that library. Miguel stayed where he was, giving her the space she needed, but his heart beat strongly in anticipation of what he was about to hear. He could feel that what Rosa kept was not a simple secret, but a whole history, a universe of pain and survival that she had kept hidden for all those years. The curtains moved gently with the breeze coming through the half-open window, carrying the scent of garden flowers mixed with the smell of old books. The pendulum clock in the corner marked the passing seconds with its constant tick-tock, a silent witness to that moment that would split the history of both into a before and an after. Rosa closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was a new determination in them, the decision to finally release what she had carried alone for so long. She began with a firmer, though still shaky voice. "I never chose not to get married. Life chose for me many years ago." She paused, gathering courage, because the truth is that I was married once, and that story almost destroyed me completely. Rosa's words fell on Miguel like a lightning bolt in a clear sky. For 15 years, he had assumed that she had simply chosen a life of solitude, dedicated to work. He never imagined there was a marital past, a love story that she had kept tucked away as if it were a shameful secret. "You were married?" he whispered, full of genuine surprise. Rosa nodded without turning to look at him, her eyes still fixed on the garden, as if the jacarandas could give her the strength to continue. "I got married when I was barely 19 years old," she began, her voice taking on a distant tone, as if she were narrating the life of someone else. "I was so young, Don Miguel, so innocent and full of dreams." A bitter smile crossed her lips. My husband's name was Javier. He was a carpenter. He worked with his hands, creating beautiful wooden furniture. We didn't have money, but we were happy with the little we had. Miguel finally dared to walk toward her, stopping by her side, but respecting her space. From there, he could see her profile, the expression lines around her eyes, which told stories of years of suppressed smiles and tears shed in private. Javier was a good man, Rosa continued, her voice softening at the memory. Every morning he got up before dawn to go to the workshop. He came back at night with hands full of splinters and the smell of varnish, but always with a smile for me. He brought me flowers from the road, nothing fancy, just daisies or bougainvillea he cut from the public gardens. A sad laugh escaped her lips. We got married in the town church, me in a dress borrowed from my cousin, and him in the only suit he had. The party was at my parents' house, with tamales and punch, mariachi music played by an uncle of mine. Nothing luxurious like the weddings you know, Don Miguel, but it was the happiest day of my life. Miguel listened in silence, absorbing every word, building in his mind the image of a young, radiant Rosa, full of hope. It was hard to reconcile that image with the discreet, silent woman he had known for 15 years. We lived in a small room we rented near the market. A single room where we had the bed, an old stove, and a table that Javier had built with his own hands. When we reached our first anniversary, I discovered I was pregnant. Rosa continued, and for the first time since she began her story, a genuine light appeared in her eyes. Javier cried with happiness when I told him. That night, he knelt in front of my belly and spoke to our baby, promising that even if we were poor, he would never lack love. Miguel felt a lump in his own throat at the tenderness of that scene. Our daughter was born on a spring day when the jacarandas were blooming just like now. We named her Camila because Javier said she was perfect like a flower. Rosa finally turned to look at Miguel, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Don Miguel, when I look at these jacarandas from your window, I always remember the day my Camila was born. That is why you sometimes see me standing here, looking out with the sadness that I cannot hide. Miguel extended his hand instinctively, without thinking, and Rosa took it, needing that human anchor to continue her story. Their hands, one calloused from domestic work and the other soft from office work, met with an unexpected warmth. Camila was a beautiful baby, Rosa proceeded, her voice breaking slightly. She had Javier's dark eyes and my small nose. She cried a lot the first few weeks, but Javier didn't care. He would get up at night to hold her, walking through our little room, singing songs to her that he made up as he went. A tear finally rolled down Rosa's cheek, but she made no effort to wipe it. We were poor, yes. Sometimes we had to decide between buying diapers or buying food for ourselves. But we were happy, Don Miguel. So happy that we didn't even realize everything we were lacking. Miguel squeezed her hand gently, feeling the weight of the words that were about to come. He could sense that the happiness Rosa described had not lasted. The first 4 years of Camila's life were the best of my existence. I watched her grow, take her first steps, say her first words. Javier worked more hours to give us more, always dreaming of buying a little house of our own someday. Rosa closed her eyes, preparing for the part of the story that clearly hurt her the most to tell. Camila had just turned 4 when everything collapsed, Rosa said, her voice barely audible now. Miguel had to lean closer to hear her. Javier got a job at a new construction site they were putting up on the outskirts of town. It paid better than the carpentry shop, so he accepted even though the work was more dangerous. He told me that in 6 months, we would have enough money saved for the down payment on a house. Rosa's hand was trembling now in Miguel's. Every morning, Camila and I would say goodbye to him at the door. She would yell, "Goodbye, Daddy," with her high-pitched little voice, and he would always turn around to blow her a kiss. A sob escaped Rosa's throat, but she contained it, breathing deeply. The morning of March 18th, 28 years ago, we said goodbye just like always. Javier gave me a kiss on the forehead. He tickled Camila until she laughed and went walking toward the construction site under the spring sun. Rosa opened her eyes, looking directly at Miguel with a heartbreaking intensity. It was the last time I saw him alive. Miguel felt his heart break. That afternoon, everything I knew as happiness turned to ashes. March 18th started like any other day in Rosa's life. She woke up early, prepared coffee on the old stove, dressed Camila in her favorite little dress, and said goodbye to Javier with a kiss. While he walked toward the construction site, she began her daily tasks, washing clothes by hand, cleaning the small room, preparing beans for the meal. Camila played in a corner with rag dolls that Rosa had sewn with scraps. The sun shone brightly that morning, and Rosa remembers thinking it was a perfect day. Around 2 in the afternoon, when she was hanging wet clothes on the wire that crossed the small shared patio, she heard screams coming from the street. At first she paid them no attention, thinking they were children playing. But the screams became louder, more urgent, more desperate. Rosa felt a chill run down her spine for no apparent reason. She left the sheets half hung and ran toward the entrance of the neighborhood. What she saw froze her in place. A group of men in hard hats and construction clothes were walking fast down the street, carrying something between the 4 of them. No, not something. Someone. When they were closer, Rosa recognized the worn denim pants, the work boots with the broken soles that Javier hadn't been able to replace. No, 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 Rosa whispered, her legs beginning to move of their own volition. She ran toward them, while her heart beat so hard she felt it would jump out of her chest. She screamed Javier's name with a desperation that made the neighbors come out of their houses. The men carrying him had pale faces, marked by the horror of what they had witnessed. When she reached them, Rosa saw her husband lying motionless, his eyes closed, his face covered in dust and blood. What happened? What did they do to my husband? She screamed, trying to touch him while the men carried him toward an old truck parked nearby. "Ma'am, there was an accident at the construction site," one of them explained with a trembling voice. A beam fell from the 3rd floor. Javier was right underneath. Rosa felt the world stop, the air disappear from her lungs. "But he's okay, right? Take us to the hospital. He's going to be okay," she repeated like a desperate mantra, refusing to accept what her eyes already knew. They put Javier in the truck, and Rosa climbed in beside him, taking his hand, which was still warm. "Hold on, my love. Please hold on. Think of Camila. Think of our little daughter who is waiting for you at home." But Javier didn't respond, didn't open his eyes, didn't squeeze her hand as he always did. The public hospital was 20 minutes away, but that journey felt like an eternity. Rosa didn't stop talking to Javier, telling him about what they had done that morning, about how Camila had asked for him, about the plans they had for Sunday. The other men in the truck remained silent, their gazes full of pity, avoiding eye contact with her. When they arrived at the hospital, nurses and doctors ran toward them. They lowered Javier onto a gurney and disappeared with him through double doors that closed in Rosa's face. She tried to follow them, but a nurse stopped her firmly. "Ma'am, you have to wait here. The doctors will do everything possible." Rosa stood in front of those closed doors, shaking from head to toe, her hands stained with her husband's blood. She didn't know how much time had passed, whether minutes or hours, when finally a doctor came out with a grave expression. Rosa ran toward him, clutching at any hope. "Doctor, my husband, how is he?" The doctor looked down before answering, and in that gesture Rosa knew the truth before the words left his mouth. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. We did everything we could, but the internal injuries were too severe. Your husband passed away 10 minutes ago." Rosa's legs gave way, and she fell to her knees on the cold hospital floor. A gut-wrenching scream came from the deepest part of her being, an animal sound of pure pain that made everyone in the waiting room shudder. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She couldn't process that Javier, her Javier, who that morning had smiled and kissed her, was gone. The men who had brought Javier helped her up. They held her while her body convulsed with sobs. "I have to see him," she managed to say through tears. "Please, let me see him." They took her to a small room where Javier lay on a gurney, covered with a white sheet up to his chest. Rosa approached slowly, as if by moving slowly she could delay reality. She touched his face, still warm but motionless, and began to speak to him as if he could hear her. "You can't leave like this, Javier. You can't leave me alone with our girl. How am I going to explain to her that her daddy isn't coming back?" She cried over his chest for what felt like an eternity, until she had no tears left. When she finally left that room, Rosa was no longer the same woman who had entered. At 23 years old, she had become a widow, a single mother, a survivor. The days that followed were a blur of pain. The funeral was simple, paid for with money borrowed from neighbors and relatives. Javier was buried in the municipal cemetery under a cypress tree that gave shade in the afternoons. Camila, too young to understand the permanence of death, constantly asked when her daddy would come back. Every time she did, Rosa felt like a knife was being driven into her heart. "Daddy is with the little angels, my love," she would tell her, hugging her tight, while struggling not to collapse in front of her. Reality hit Rosa a week after the funeral, when the owner of the room they rented knocked on her door demanding back payment. She had no money. She had no job. She had nothing except a 4-year-old girl who depended entirely on her. The construction company offered her a miserable compensation, barely enough to cover the funeral expenses. There were no genuine apologies, no recognition that their negligence had killed a good man. Rosa saved that money as if it were gold, knowing she had to make it last as long as possible. She began to look for work desperately, knocking on doors, offering herself for anything: washing, ironing, cooking, cleaning. She found sporadic jobs here and there, never anything permanent, Never anything that paid enough. She went from house to house, taking Camila with her when she had no one to leave her with, leaving her with neighbors when possible. The years that followed were the hardest of her life. Rosa worked from before dawn until after dark, accepting any job, no matter how humiliating. She washed toilets, scrubbed floors on her knees, carried heavy buckets of water. Her hands, which once were soft, became filled with calluses and cracks. Her back began to ache constantly, but none of that mattered, as long as she could put food in Camilla's mouth. There were nights when Rosa went to sleep on an empty stomach so that her daughter could eat. There were days when she walked miles under the burning sun because she had no money for the bus, but never, not once, did she consider giving up. Camila was her reason for continuing to breathe, for getting up every morning even though her body screamed with exhaustion. The girl grew up beautiful and cheerful, despite the difficulties, standing out in the public school where Rosa had enrolled her. During those years, Rosa never thought about falling in love again. The men she met at jobs sometimes made proposals, some respectable, others not so much. She rejected them all without a second thought. Her heart had been buried along with Javier under that cypress in the cemetery. There was no space in her life for love, only for survival and for her daughter, until Camila turned 14 and life decided to give her another devastating test. Camila was 14 years old when she started to get sick. Rosa continued, her voice now firmer after having told the most painful part. Miguel continued to listen in silence, his hand still holding hers, offering silent comfort. At first, I thought they were normal growing pains. She complained that her abdomen hurt a lot, that she felt tired all the time. But the pains got worse. It reached a point where my girl couldn't even walk without doubling over in pain. Rosa swallowed hard, remembering those terrible days. I took her to the public hospital, where they made us wait hours before seeing us. When they finally saw Camila, the doctors frowned and ordered urgent tests. The results showed she had a serious problem in her ovaries, something that required immediate surgery, or it could become fatal. Miguel felt his heart shrink at the desperation Rosa must have felt at that moment. But the surgery was expensive, Don Miguel. Terribly expensive. The public hospital had a waiting list of months, and the doctor said Camila couldn't wait that long. She needed surgery in a private hospital, and that cost more money than I could ever gather in my entire life. Rosa let go of Miguel's hand and walked back toward the window, needing the space to continue with what was coming. I did the only thing I could think of. I started knocking on doors in the wealthy neighborhoods of San Miguel de Allende, asking for work in advance, begging for loans, pleading for any help. Her voice broke slightly. Don Miguel. I knocked on the doors of more than 50 houses. In some, they didn't even open for me. In others, they looked at me with contempt and slammed the door in my face. There were ladies who yelled at me for daring to ask for money, as if I were a beggar without dignity. Miguel felt a burning rage against those people who had rejected Rosa in her most desperate moment. I was destroyed, exhausted, without hope. Camila was getting worse every day, and I couldn't do anything to save her. I felt like the worst mother in the world, incapable of protecting my only daughter. Rosa wiped the tears that now ran freely down her cheeks. Then I arrived at this house, this beautiful mansion with its terracotta walls and its carved wooden door. It was the evening of April 22nd, exactly 15 years ago. I rang the bell without much hope, expecting yet another rejection. Rosa continued, her voice taking on a different tone now, softer, filled with a different emotion. Get out. But the one who opened the door was not an employee or a butler. It was Doña Elena, your wife. She opened it herself that afternoon. Miguel felt a chill run down his spine upon hearing the name of his late wife. Doña Elena looked at me with those kind eyes she had, and before I could say a word, she noticed my desperation. I was haggard, hadn't slept for days, with old clothes and broken shoes. I must have looked pathetic. Rosa smiled sadly at the memory. She let me in, Don Miguel. She sat me in the living room, brought me a glass of water with her own hands, and said, "Tell me what's wrong, dear. What is it that you need?" Miguel's heart beat strongly now, sensing a revelation that would change everything. I told her about Camila, about the surgery, about my desperation. I told her I was willing to work for years without pay, to do whatever was necessary, if only she would help me save my daughter. Rosa turned to look directly at Miguel, her eyes shining with eternal gratitude. Doña Elena didn't hesitate for a second, Don Miguel. She took my hands, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Let's go to the hospital right now. I'll take care of everything." Rosa's voice trembled with emotion. I thought I had misheard, that I was hallucinating from exhaustion and hunger. But she was already taking her bag, putting on a sweater, calling her driver. Miguel felt tears well up in his own eyes, recognizing Elena's infinite kindness in that action. We went to the hospital that same night. Doña Elena spoke to the doctors, arranged everything, paid for the entire surgery without blinking. She didn't know me at all, Don Miguel. She had no reason to trust me or help me, but she did. Rosa began to cry openly now, years of gratitude pouring out. While Camila was in surgery, Doña Elena stayed with me in the waiting room. She hugged me when I was shaking with fear, prayed with me, gave me strength when I felt I was collapsing. The operation lasted 4 hours, the longest of my life. When the doctor came out and said Camila would be fine, that the surgery had been a success, I collapsed in Doña Elena's arms, crying like I had never cried before. But your wife didn't stop there, Rosa continued with a trembling voice. During Camila's recovery, which lasted 2 weeks in the hospital, Doña Elena visited us every day, brought homemade food, books for Camila to distract herself, flowers to brighten the room. And when Camila could finally leave the hospital, Doña Elena offered me permanent work here in the mansion. Rosa smiled through her tears. She said to me, "Rosa, you have a family here now. This house is your house. As long as I live, you will never again have to worry about having a roof or food for your daughter." Miguel sat heavily in the nearest armchair, overwhelmed by Rosa's revelations. For 15 years he had shared a roof with this woman, without knowing the extraordinary story that linked her to Elena, without knowing his wife had saved her daughter, without understanding the depth of Rosa's loyalty. Why did Elena never tell me? He asked with a raspy voice. Rosa approached slowly, sitting in the armchair across from him. Doña Elena was like that, Don Miguel. She did good without expecting recognition. She made me promise I would never tell you, because she said kindness loses its value when it's made public. She wanted you to see me as your employee, not as a charity project. Miguel shook his head, still processing everything. But Elena died 5 years ago, Rosa. You could have told me afterward. Rosa looked down. I didn't want you to see me differently, Don Miguel. I didn't want your pity. I preferred to go on being simply Rosa, the woman who looks after your house, who honors Doña Elena's memory in silence. Miguel leaned forward, searching for Rosa's eyes. And Camila, is your daughter okay now? The question made Rosa's face light up with the first glimpse of true joy since she began her story. A genuine smile illuminated Rosa's face for the first time in the entire conversation, completely transforming her features. It was as if the sun had come out after an endless storm. Camila became a doctor. Don Miguel said with a maternal pride so deep it made her voice tremble with emotion. After that surgery that saved her life, my girl decided she wanted to help other people like us. People who have no resources, but who deserve to live. Miguel felt his heart expand at that news. Doña Elena not only paid for her surgery, she also helped her with high school and her university studies. When Camila told her she wanted to study medicine, Doña Elena replied, "Then medicine you shall study, my child. Don't let money stop you from fulfilling your dream." Tears returned to Rosa's eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. My daughter graduated 3 years ago with honors, Don Miguel. Now she works at the San Miguel de Allende Public Hospital, the same one where I used to take her when she was sick and we had no money. She sees humble families without charging them, just as Doña Elena would have wanted. Miguel stood up abruptly, walking toward Rosa with determined steps. Why did you never bring her here? Why did you never speak to me about her? Rosa shrunk slightly, as if expecting a scolding. I didn't want to abuse your hospitality, Don Miguel. You had already done so much for us through Doña Elena. I didn't want you to feel that I was taking advantage of your kindness. Miguel shook his head, a mix of frustration and tenderness in his expression. Rosa, do you really think Elena would have wanted you to feel that way? Do you think I am the kind of man who would look down on you bringing your daughter to visit? Rosa looked down in shame. It's just that Camila is a doctor now, Don Miguel. She has an education, a university degree, respect in the community. I am just a domestic employee. I was afraid you would think I was trying to mix my world with yours. Rosa's words broke Miguel's heart in a way he didn't expect. For 15 years, this woman had carried that invisible separation alone, keeping her personal life completely apart from her work, believing that was the appropriate distance. I want to meet Camila, Miguel said firmly. I want to meet the daughter of the woman who has looked after me for 15 years. The daughter Elena helped save and educate. Would you do me that honor? Rosa looked at him surprised, her eyes searching Miguel's face for any sign that he was only saying it out of politeness. But what she found was pure sincerity. Camila comes to visit me on Sundays after Mass, Rosa confessed softly. We sit in the park near here. We eat tacos I buy at the corner stand, and she tells me about her week at the hospital. She tells me about the patients she saved, the difficult cases, her dreams of someday having her own clinic to help more people. The image Rosa painted was so tender that Miguel felt a lump in his throat. Sometimes we stay for hours in that park, just talking and laughing. They are the happiest moments of my week, Don Miguel. When I see my daughter so beautiful and successful, I remember that 14-year-old girl writhing in pain in a hospital bed, and I can't believe everything she has achieved. Rosa wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Every time Camilla saves a life, she thanks God and Doña Elena. She has a photo of her benefactor in her office, even though they never really knew each other. Camilla was 14 when Doña Elena saved her, and she was already very sick when she met her. But my daughter says Doña Elena is her guardian angel. Miguel walked back to the window, looking out at the garden where the jacarandas swayed gently in the breeze. Elena was right. He murmured more to himself than to Rosa. She always said that a person's true legacy is not in what they accumulate, but in the lives they touch. He turned to look at Rosa with a new intensity in his eyes. Do you know how many times in these 5 years since Elena died, I have wondered if she really left a mark on this world? We were rich, yes, but we had no children. I built companies and made money. But what will remain when I am gone? Miguel's voice filled with emotion. And now I find out that Elena not only saved your daughter, but created a doctor who is saving dozens more people. That her kindness multiplied, expanded, became something larger than she could have ever imagined. Rosa nodded, deeply understanding what Miguel was expressing. Doña Elena lives on in every patient Camila saves, Don Miguel. She lives on in this house that I tend to as if it were a sacred temple. She lives on in every act of kindness that her generosity inspired. Miguel felt something break inside him, a wall he had built around his heart since Elena's death. For 5 years he'd lived in this mansion like a ghost, going to his office, coming home, existing, but not really living. He had avoided the rooms Elena had loved, had stopped attending the social events she enjoyed, had closed his heart to the world. But now, listening to Rosa's story, he realized Elena had left him something precious. She had left him Rosa herself. The days following that conversation in the library were different. Miguel began to see Rosa with completely new eyes. She wasn't just the efficient employee who kept his house impeccable. She was a woman with a story of love, loss, sacrifice, and unbreakable strength. She was someone who had loved deeply and lost everything, but who had found the strength to go on for her daughter. Every time Rosa entered a room, Miguel found himself observing her, noticing details he had previously overlooked. The way she hummed softly while cooking, the care with which she arranged fresh flowers in the vases every week, the tenderness in her eyes when she looked at the photographs of Elena that still adorned the house. Rosa also noticed the change. Miguel no longer disappeared into his office all day. Now he came down to the kitchen to have coffee in the mornings and stayed talking with her about simple things: the weather, the news, plans for the garden. They were mundane conversations on the surface, but there was something deeper flowing underneath, a connection that hadn't existed before. One afternoon, while Rosa was preparing dinner, Miguel entered the kitchen and asked, "What did Camila like to eat when she was a child?" Rosa smiled, surprised by the question. "She loved squash blossom quesadillas, Don Miguel. I used to make them on the griddle every week when I could buy the blossoms at the market." Miguel nodded pensively. "Do you think she would like to come to dinner this Sunday?" The spoon Rosa was holding fell to the floor with a metallic clang. She stood looking at Miguel with incredulity. "Are you serious, Don Miguel?" He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face in a way Rosa hadn't seen in years. Completely serious. I want to meet your daughter, Rosa. I want to meet the young woman Elena helped create. And besides, he added with a mischievous spark in his eyes, it has been a long time since this house hosted guests. I think Elena would be happy to know we are filling it with life again. Rosa put her hands to her mouth, trying to contain the tears that threatened to overflow. I don't know what to say, Don Miguel. Camila will be so excited. She's always wanted to thank you personally for everything you and Doña Elena did for us. Miguel approached and took Rosa's hands in his, a gesture that would have been unthinkable barely a week ago. Then it is decided. This Sunday, you and Camila will dine here as my guests. And Rosa, he added softly, stop calling me Don Miguel when we are alone. Just Miguel is fine. Rosa felt her heart beat in a strange way, a sensation she hadn't experienced for more than 20 years. It was as if something asleep for decades was slowly starting to wake up. Sunday arrived faster than Rosa expected. She spent the entire week nervous, changing her mind 1,000 times about what to cook, what to wear, how to introduce Camila. Miguel surprised her by getting involved in the preparations, suggesting they set the table in the formal dining room that hadn't been used since Elena died. I want it to be special, he insisted. And Rosa could do nothing but accept, moved by his enthusiasm. When Camila arrived that afternoon, dressed in a simple but elegant dress, Miguel opened the door personally. The 29-year-old doctor was beautiful, with her mother's bright eyes and a warm smile that lit up her face. Mr. Miguel, she said with an emotional voice, you don't know how long I have waited for this moment. Miguel hugged her as if he had known her his whole life. Call me Miguel, please, and I am the one who has waited to meet you. Your mother has told me wonderful things about you. The dinner was magical in a way none of the three had anticipated. Camila told stories of the hospital, of patients she had saved, of the challenges of working in the public system. Miguel shared anecdotes of his years with Elena, stories Rosa had never heard because she had always maintained that respectful distance. For the first time in 5 years, the mansion was filled with genuine laughter, and Rosa, sitting at that table, felt that something impossible was beginning to happen. She was being happy again. The weeks that followed that dinner transformed the dynamics of the house completely. Miguel began to look for excuses to spend more time with Rosa. He asked her for opinions on decisions he used previously to make alone. He invited her to have coffee in the afternoons on the terrace while they discussed the events of the day. Rosa, for her part, began to lower the defenses she had carefully built over 15 years. She no longer referred to him as Don Miguel, but simply as Miguel, although it had taken her several weeks to get used to it. They talked about everything, about life, about loss, about dreams they had left behind and those they still harbored in secret. One afternoon, while they were having tea in the garden under the jacarandas, Miguel asked her, "Do you miss Javier?" The question was direct, without detours, the kind that is only asked when true trust exists. Rosa reflected before answering. "Every day," she admitted softly. "But the pain is no longer as sharp as it was. Now it is more of a sweet melancholy, the memory of something beautiful I was fortunate to live, even if it was for a short time." Miguel nodded, perfectly understanding that feeling. That is how I feel about Elena during the first years after her death. The pain was so intense I could barely breathe. But now when I think of her, I smile more than I cry. It was on one of those quiet sunsets when Miguel realized he'd fallen in love with Rosa. It wasn't a lightning bolt from the sky or a dramatic movie moment. It was something subtle, like the gradual change of the seasons. They were sitting in the garden. Rosa was telling him about a young patient Camila had saved that week. And while listening to her talk with such passion and pride about her daughter, Miguel observed how the sunset light illuminated her face. He noticed the small wrinkles around her eyes that formed when she smiled, the way her hands moved expressively while she talked, the softness in her voice when she mentioned the people she loved, and in that moment, he knew it with absolute certainty. He had fallen in love with Rosa. It wasn't the impetuous and passionate love of youth. It was something deeper, quieter, more solid. It was the love of two wounded souls who had found mutual comfort, of two people who understood each other without the need for long explanations. Miguel said nothing at that moment. The discovery was too new, too fragile to put into words. But something changed in his way of looking at Rosa, and she noticed it, although she didn't understand exactly what was different. She only knew that when Miguel looked at her now, she felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in decades. Rosa was also changing, although she fought against those changes with all her strength. She began to fix herself up a little more in the mornings, choosing her clothes more carefully, ensuring her hair was well combed. She caught herself thinking of Miguel during the day, wondering what he would be doing in his office, if he had lunch well, if he would be tired. When she heard his car arrive in the afternoons, her heart beat a little faster. All these reactions confused and scared her. She felt guilty, as if she were betraying Javier's memory and Elena's kindness. One night, while praying before sleeping, as she did every night, she spoke to God about her confusion. "I don't know what is happening to me," she whispered in the darkness of her small room. "I have spent almost 30 years alone, taking care of Camila, honoring Javier's memory and Doña Elena's kindness. Why now, when I am already an older woman, is my heart waking up again?" There was no audible answer, only the silence of the night and the distant sound of crickets in the garden. But Rosa felt an inexplicable peace, as if an invisible hand reassured her, telling her it was okay to feel what she felt. However, the fear was still there, whispering to her that she wasn't enough, that she could never belong to Miguel's world. Months passed, and the relationship between Miguel and Rosa continued to deepen. Camila visited more often now, always received with open arms by Miguel, who had begun to treat her like the daughter he never had. The young doctor noticed with perceptive eyes what was blooming between her mother and Miguel, and although she said nothing directly, sometimes she gave Rosa knowing looks that made her blush. One afternoon, after Miguel retired to his office, Camila sat with her mother in the kitchen. "Mom, can I ask you something?" she began softly. Rosa, who was washing the dinner dishes, nodded without turning, sensing where the conversation was going. "Do you like Miguel?" The direct question made Rosa almost drop the plate she was holding. "Camila, don't say foolish things. He is my employer. I am his employee. Besides, I am 15 years older than when your father died. I am no longer a young woman who can think of those things. Camila stood up and hugged her mother from behind, resting her chin on her shoulder. Mom, you are 52 years old, not 80. And Miguel looks at you in a way I recognize because that is how men look when they are in love. More importantly, you look at him the same way. Rosa felt tears gather in her eyes. I am afraid, my child. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of betraying your father's memory. Afraid of ruining what your benefactor built for us. Camilla turned her mother to face her, taking her face in her hands with tenderness. Mom, my father died 28 years ago. You were barely 23, and you dedicated every minute of your life to raising me, to surviving, to honoring his memory. But Dad wouldn't have wanted you to spend the rest of your life alone. Tears were running freely down Rosa's face now. And as for Doña Elena, Camila continued, she saved you precisely so you would have a life, not just so you would be her employee eternally. Don't you think she, who was so generous with you, would want to see you happy? Rosa hugged her daughter tightly, sobbing against her shoulder. I don't know how to allow myself to be happy again, Camilla. I don't know if I deserve that kind of happiness. Camilla hugged her tighter. Mom, if anyone in this world deserves to be happy, it is you. You have given so much. You have sacrificed so much. You have loved so much. It is your turn to receive love. Her daughter's words planted a seed in Rosa's heart, a small spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to dream again. That night, Rosa looked at her reflection in the mirror of her small room. She saw a 52-year-old woman with graying hair at the temples, wrinkles that told stories of pain and survival, hands calloused from hard work. But she also saw something else. She saw a woman who still had light in her eyes, who still had love to give, who still had life ahead of her. And for the first time in almost 30 years, Rosa allowed herself to wonder if maybe it wasn't too late for a new beginning. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video. One November night, 6 months after that conversation in the library that had changed everything, Miguel called Rosa into his study. She went up the stairs with her heart beating fast, not knowing what to expect. When she entered, she found Miguel standing by his mahogany desk, holding a yellowed envelope that clearly was years old. The lamplight created soft shadows on his face, and Rosa noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Rosa, there is something you need to see, he said with an emotional voice. Something I found among Elena's personal papers when I finally dared to look through her things. Rosa approached slowly, her own hands beginning to shake without knowing why. Miguel extended the envelope toward her. Elena left me several letters before she died, instructions on different things, thoughts she wanted to share with me after her departure. But this... He paused, his voice breaking. This letter she wrote specifically for me to read when I was ready to move on with my life. Rosa took the envelope with reverence, noticing Elena's elegant handwriting on the front. For my beloved Miguel, when your heart is ready to love again. Tears began to gather in Rosa's eyes even before opening the letter. Miguel nodded, encouraging her to read. With trembling hands, Rosa extracted the pages from the envelope and began to read aloud. My beloved Miguel, Rosa began, her voice breaking with every word. If you are reading this letter, it means I have departed and that you have finally found the courage to look through my most personal things. I know your heart, my love. I know you have spent years locked in this house, living like a ghost, believing that loving me means remaining alone forever. Rosa paused to wipe away the tears running down her cheeks. Miguel was crying too, listening to the words of his late wife, as if she were there in the room with them. But I need you to understand something crucial. True love does not hold back. It releases. I loved you with every fiber of my being during our years together, and because I loved you so much, I want you to be happy, even without me. I don't want you to spend the rest of your life as a living monument to my memory. Rosa continued reading, her heart beating faster and faster. During my last months, I observed the people in our life a lot. And there was someone who caught my attention in a special way, Rosa. That extraordinary woman who came to us desperate, seeking to save her daughter, and who has since become the silent heart of our home. Rosa let out a sob, unable to believe what she was reading. I saw in Rosa a strength that few people possess. I saw her dedication, her kindness, her capacity to love deeply despite having lost so much. Miguel, Rosa continued, reading through tears. In Rosa's eyes, I always saw something that reminded me of you, a pure love and an unwavering loyalty. I saw how she observed you when she thought no one was looking, with a respect and an affection that went beyond the duty of an employee. I saw how you looked at her too, although you didn't realize it, with an admiration you would never admit aloud. Miguel slumped into his chair, overwhelmed by Elena's revelations. So I tell you this with all my love and all my certainty. Don't stay alone forever, my love. If your heart finds comfort again, don't reject it out of loyalty to me. And if by chance you find that comfort in Rosa paused, her voice almost inaudible now, know that you have my complete blessing. She deserves to be loved after so many years of sacrifice. You deserve to be happy after so much pain, and you both deserve to find in the other what life took away from you. Rosa's hands were shaking so much she could barely hold the paper. Rosa is a dignified woman, Miguel. Don't let class differences or the opinions of others prevent you from seeing what I saw. That she has a heart of gold and a beautiful soul. If someday you grow close to each other, don't feel guilt. Love doesn't diminish when shared. It multiplies. Rosa finished reading with a broken voice. With all my eternal love, Elena. The silence that followed was absolute. Rosa and Miguel looked at each other through their tears, both processing Elena's words, both feeling as if she herself had entered the room to give her blessing. Wait, Rosa whispered suddenly, her voice barely audible. Wait here, Miguel. There is something I need to show you. Without waiting for an answer, she ran out of the study, her footsteps echoing down the hallway as she went down the stairs at full speed. Miguel remained alone, holding Elena's letter, feeling as if the whole world had changed in those last minutes. Rosa reached her small room next to the kitchen, opened the bottom drawer of her old dresser, and took out a shoebox where she kept her most precious treasures. Inside, among photographs of Camila and memories of Javier, was an envelope she would recognize anywhere. With trembling hands, she took it and ran back to Miguel's study. When she entered, he looked up surprised. Elena also left me a letter, Rosa said with a trembling voice, extending the yellowed envelope. She gave it to me 2 weeks before she died. She told me to read it after her departure, when I felt ready. But I never had the courage to show it to you, Miguel. I was afraid of what it meant, afraid of misinterpreting her intentions. Miguel took the envelope with reverence, noticing it also had Rosa's name written in Elena's elegant handwriting. "Let's read it together," he said softly, and both sat side by side as Miguel opened the letter carefully. "Dear Rosa," Miguel began to read with an emotional voice. "If you are reading this letter, it means I have finally departed and that you have had the courage to open it. I want you to know that during these last months, as my body weakened, my mind was never clearer, and there was something I was completely sure of. You were more than an employee to me, Rosa. You were the sister I never had, the friend I always needed." Miguel paused, moved by his wife's words. "I know you keep your heart under lock and key, closed with padlocks of loyalty toward me and toward your husband's memory. But Rosa, my dear Rosa, I need you to understand something. Neither I nor you, Javier, would want you to spend the rest of your life alone, denying yourself the possibility of being loved again." Tears ran down Miguel's face as he read. "Miguel is a good man, the best I have known. When I am gone, he will remain alone in this huge house, surrounded by memories, but without real life around him. I know he respects you, admires you, although he probably has never told you, and I know also that you look after him with an affection that goes beyond duty." Miguel looked up to look at Rosa, who was crying in silence. "If someday, when the pain of my departure has softened, you two find comfort in each other, don't feel guilt. Don't feel like you are betraying me. On the contrary, it would make me the happiest woman in heaven to know that two people I love so much found happiness together." Miguel finished reading with a broken voice. "Look after him as you looked after me, Rosa, and let yourself be looked after too. You both deserve that happiness. With all my eternal affection, Elena." The two fell to their knees at that moment, hugging while crying, finally understanding that Elena had planted the seeds of that love long before departing, that she had seen what they themselves hadn't dared to recognize. The 2 letters, written separately but with the same message of love and blessing, had finally set them free to love, without guilt. Miguel and Rosa remained embraced on the floor of the study for a long time, crying together, releasing years of pain, loneliness, and contained guilt. Elena's letters lay by their side, silent witnesses to that transforming moment. When they finally separated, Miguel took Rosa's face between his hands with a tenderness she had never experienced. "Rosa," he said with a firm but emotional voice, "during these last months, something has changed in me. At first I didn't understand what it was. It confused me. It scared me. But now, after reading these letters, after understanding that Elena gave us her blessing, I can finally admit what my heart has been screaming for weeks." Rosa looked at him with wide eyes, her breath hitched, waiting for words she never believed she would hear. "I have fallen in love with you, Rosa, deeply, completely, inevitably, in love with you." The words floated in the air between them, like butterflies released after years of captivity. It's not the impetuous love of youth. It's something deeper, more real, more solid. It's the love of someone who understands pain, who values strength, who recognizes the beauty of the soul beyond the surface. Miguel gently stroked Rosa's cheeks, drying her tears with his thumbs. I fell in love with your dedication, your silent kindness, the way you love your daughter with all your being. I fell in love with your sad smile that I always wanted to decipher, with your hard-working hands that look after this house as if it were a sacred temple. For 15 years, Rosa, you have been the invisible heart of this house. You have looked after me without me realizing how much I needed that care. You have honored Elena's memory with every action, with every gesture of love toward this place she loved. Miguel's voice broke slightly. But Elena was right about something crucial. You are not just an employee. You never really were. You are part of this family. You are part of my life. And now I want you to be part of my heart as well. Rosa was sobbing openly now, unable to form words, overwhelmed by the intensity of that moment. I no longer want you to live in that small room next to the kitchen as if you were a stranger in this house. I want you to take your rightful place here, not as an employee, not as a guest, but as the owner of my heart, as my partner, as my equal. Miguel knelt completely in front of her, taking her hands in his. Rosa, I know this is unexpected. I know it probably scares you as much as it scared me, but Elena gave us permission to be happy. More than that, she encouraged us to find in the other what life took from us. He gently kissed Rosa's hands, his lips grazing the calluses work had left on her skin. Tell me you also feel something, even if it's a spark. Tell me I am not alone in this. His voice was the desperate plea of a man who had finally found the courage to open up after years of solitude. Rosa finally found her voice, though it came out broken and trembling. Miguel, I don't even know how to begin to explain what I feel. She wiped away tears with trembling hands. For almost 30 years since Javier died, I closed my heart with iron locks. I convinced myself that romantic love was no longer for me, that my only mission in life was to raise Camilla and honor the kindness Elena showed me. She paused, searching for the right words. But these last months, since we had that conversation in the library, something began to change inside of me. Feelings began to appear that I thought had died decades ago. A sad smile crossed her lips. At first, I fought against them with all my strength. I felt guilty, as if I were betraying Javier's memory. I felt unworthy, believing I could never belong to your world. I felt scared of what it meant to allow myself to feel again after so much time of being emotionally asleep. Miguel squeezed her hands, encouraging her to continue. But the truth, Miguel, the truth I have been avoiding admitting even to myself, is that I also fell in love with you. The words came out in a whisper, but resonated in the study like a shout. I fell in love with your kindness, with the way you honor Elena's memory, without letting that memory consume you. I fell in love with how you receive my daughter with open arms, treating her like family. I fell in love with our conversations in the garden, with the way you really listen to me when I speak, as if my words had value beyond reporting the day's tasks. Rosa smiled through her tears. I fell in love with your laughter, which I hear so little of, but which lights up the whole house when it appears. I fell in love with your gentleness, with how you have never made me feel less for being who I am. But then her expression turned serious, worried. But Miguel, I am so afraid of not being enough for you. I look around this study, this mansion, your life, and I wonder what place I could really occupy here. Her voice filled with insecurity. I am a 52-year-old woman with calloused hands and a back tired from hard work. I have no formal education beyond elementary school. I don't know how to behave in your social circle. I don't know the rules of your world. What will your friends say, your business partners, when they know the successful businessman Miguel fell in love with his domestic employee? Tears ran freely down her face now. I don't want to be a reason for shame for you. I don't want you one day to regret having lowered your guard in a moment of loneliness and vulnerability. She looked down, unable to hold Miguel's gaze. Besides, what can I offer you that you don't have already? I have no riches. I have no connections. I have nothing more than this worn-out heart that has lived too much pain. Her voice was barely a whisper now. I'm afraid that when the novelty passes, you will realize you made a mistake. Miguel stopped her gently, placing a finger under her chin to force her to look at him. Rosa, listen to me well, because I am going to say this only once. His voice was firm but full of love. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care about the comments of people who have never known a person's true value. I don't care about the absurd rules of a social circle that values money above character. He took her face between his hands again. You ask what you can offer me that I don't have already. Rosa, you offer me everything money cannot buy. You offer me a pure heart that has loved deeply and still has space to love again. You offer me a strength that survived tragedies that would have destroyed weaker people. You offer me loyalty, kindness, genuine compassion. His eyes shone with intensity. I don't need you to belong to my world, Rosa. To hell with my world. What I need is for you to be my world. He moved closer, their foreheads almost touching. And as for your calloused hands and your tired back, those are the marks of a warrior, of a survivor, of a woman who did the impossible to give her daughter a better life. Those hands you see as imperfect are the hands that have looked after me for 15 years, that have kept Elena's memory alive in every corner of this house. Miguel took her hands and kissed them with reverence. I mean, these are the most beautiful hands I have seen because they are full of love and sacrifice. He looked her directly in the eyes with absolute determination. You don't need to belong to my world, Rosa. You are my world, my home, my reason for waking up every morning with hope, once again. Miguel's words resonated in Rosa's heart, like church bells announcing a new dawn. During all her adult life, since Javier died, Rosa had built walls around her heart, convincing herself that romantic love was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had dedicated every gram of her energy to surviving, to raising Camila, to honoring Elena's kindness. But now, in that study lit by the soft light of the lamps, with Elena's letters testifying to her blessing, those walls began to crumble. Miguel, she whispered, her voice still shaky, but with a new determination. I am so afraid of being happy after so many years of only surviving. It's as if I don't remember how to do it. Miguel smiled with tenderness. wiping the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. Then we will learn together, Rosa. I haven't been truly happy since Elena died either. I have existed, I have worked, I have breathed, but I haven't lived. They stood up slowly, still holding hands, neither wanting to break that physical connection that seemed to keep them anchored in that transforming moment. What do we do now? Rosa asked, feeling like an inexperienced teenager despite her 52 years. Miguel laughed softly, a sound that filled the study with warmth. I suppose we start slowly, without hurry, without pressure, just two people who are allowing themselves to feel again. He kissed her on the forehead with so much tenderness that Rosa felt her heart melt. That night marked the beginning of something beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The following days were a strange mix of normality and novelty. During the day, Rosa went about her usual tasks, but now there was a lightness in her steps that didn't exist before. Miguel worked in his office, but came down more often to have coffee with her, to share a knowing smile, to simply be in her presence. The afternoons in the garden under the jacarandas became their sacred ritual, where they talked about everything and nothing, where they allowed themselves to know each other in new ways. One afternoon, while they were having tea, Miguel took Rosa's hand on the table. I have been thinking, he began with a certain shyness that was adorable in a man of his age and position, that maybe we should tell Camilla about us. Officially, I mean. Rosa smiled widely. Miguel, my daughter knew before we did ourselves. She has been encouraging me to accept my feelings for you for months. Miguel was genuinely surprised. Really? And what exactly did she say? Rosa laughed, remembering the conversations with her daughter. She told me I deserved to be happy, that both my father and Elena would want to see me loved again, and that if I didn't give you a chance, she personally would drag me to your office to declare my love to you. Miguel let out a laugh so loud and genuine that the birds in the garden were startled and flew away. I like that girl more and more. But then, his expression turned serious. Rosa, there is something else we need to talk about. She looked at him with curiosity mixed with a touch of concern. I want you to move in with me to the main rooms of the house. Rosa felt the air escape her lungs. Miguel, I don't know if I'm ready for that. He squeezed her hand gently. Don't misunderstand me. I am not suggesting anything inappropriate. But Rosa, you have spent 15 years living in that small room next to the kitchen, as if you were a temporary guest in this house. I want you to have a dignified space, for you to feel truly at home here. Rosa processed his words carefully. This house has beautiful rooms I never use, Miguel continued. The room next to mine was Elena's old study. It has a view of the garden, its own bathroom. It is spacious and bright. I want it to be yours. He saw the doubt in Rosa's eyes and added quickly, you don't have to decide now. Just think about it. But I need you to understand that you are no longer my employee, Rosa. You are the woman I love, and you deserve to be treated as such. Those words resonated in Rosa for days. One afternoon, while Camila was visiting her, she told her about Miguel's proposal. Her daughter looked at her with a mix of exasperation and love. Mom, why do you keep resisting your own happiness? Rosa sighed. It's just that everything is changing so fast, Camila. For 30 years, my life has been a certain way. and now suddenly everything is different. Camilla took her mother's hands. Mom, change is scary, but staying stuck in the past for fear of the future is even more terrifying. Miguel is offering you not just his love, but also a place of dignity and respect in his life. Why don't you accept it? Rosa finally nodded, understanding that her daughter was right. It was time to take the leap of faith. Rosa's move to the upper floor of the mansion was more symbolic than physical, since she didn't have many possessions. But Miguel made sure the room that would now be Rosa's was perfect. He bought new furniture, beautiful curtains, filled the space with fresh flowers. When Rosa saw the room for the first time, she covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed by the care and love Miguel had put into every detail. "It's too much," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "Nothing is too much for you," replied Miguel, hugging her from behind as they looked at the garden together from the window. The news of their relationship gradually leaked to the small social circle of San Miguel de Allende. As Rosa had feared, there were comments, whispers, looks of disapproval. Some of Miguel's friends called him discreetly to express their concern for his reputation, but Miguel silenced them firmly. "Rosa is the most dignified and honorable woman I know. If you cannot see it, that is your problem, not mine." There were those who stopped inviting him to social events, but Miguel didn't seem to care in the least. "I prefer a quiet afternoon at home with Rosa than 1,000 fancy dinners with superficial people," he told her one night. Rosa, for her part, struggled with her own insecurities. There were moments when she felt out of place, such as when Miguel took her to fancy restaurants where the waiters looked at her with barely disguised curiosity. But Miguel was always there, holding her, reminding her of her value, defending her from cruel looks and comments. Little by little, Rosa began to believe what Miguel had told her, that she was enough, that she was dignified, that she deserved love and happiness. 6 months after that transformative night in the study, during an intimate dinner in the garden under the stars, Miguel knelt in front of Rosa with a velvet box in his hands. "Rosa, these months with you have been the happiest since I lost Elena. You have taught me that the human heart has an infinite capacity to love, that honoring the past doesn't mean getting stuck in it." He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. "I don't want to spend another day without you officially being my life partner. Would you marry me, Rosa? Would you give me the honor of being your husband and of you being my wife?" Rosa couldn't contain her crying. During all her adult life, after losing Javier, she never imagined she would hear those words again. "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, Miguel. 1,000 times yes." When he slid the ring onto her finger, Rosa felt that 30 years of pain, loneliness, and sacrifice finally found their reward. Camila, who had been hiding behind the jacarandas as an accomplice to the plan, ran out to hug her mother and Miguel, the three crying and laughing at the same time. "Mom," whispered Camila into Rosa's ear. "Dad would be so happy to see you like this, and Doña Elena would be applauding from heaven." Rosa looked at the ring on her finger, then at Miguel, then at her daughter, and finally at the starry sky over San Miguel de Allende. For the first time in decades, she felt the universe was finally in balance. The girl who had lost her husband at 23 had finally found the way back to love at 52, proving it's never too late for a second chance. The wedding day arrived on a perfect spring morning when the jacarandas were in full bloom, shedding their lilac petals like blessings from heaven over the mansion garden. Rosa had insisted on an intimate ceremony, only with the people who really mattered in their lives. Camilla had helped her mother choose a simple, yet elegant, ivory-colored dress that reflected Rosa's dignity and discreet beauty. Miguel wore a dark suit and couldn't stop smiling, looking years younger than the lonely and dull man he had been barely a year ago. The makeshift altar was placed under the largest jacaranda tree in the garden, the same tree where Rosa used to stand and contemplate the flowers, remembering the day Camilla was born. Now, that same tree would be witness to her new beginning. The guests were few, but significant. Camilla as maid of honor, some employees from the hospital where she worked, who had come to love Rosa through the stories the young doctor told, and two of Miguel's business partners, who genuinely were happy for his happiness. Notably absent were those who had criticized the relationship, and neither Miguel nor Rosa missed them. When Rosa walked toward the altar on her daughter's arm, because Camila had insisted on being the one to give her away, Miguel felt his heart jump out of his chest. At 52, Rosa was beautiful not because of the youth of her face, but because of the light she radiated from within, the light of someone who had finally found peace after decades of struggle. The ceremony was conducted by a local priest who knew Rosa and Miguel's story well, and whose words reflected the uniqueness of that marriage. Today we do not witness only the union of two people, Father Tomas began, his voice resonating softly in the garden. We witness the triumph of hope over despair, of love over fear, of faith over doubt. He looked directly at Rosa and Miguel with eyes full of understanding. Both have known the pain of losing the love of your life. Both have walked through the valley of shadows and have survived. And now, by the grace of God and the blessing of those who loved you before, you have found the courage to love again. Rosa squeezed Miguel's hand, remembering Elena's letters that had made this moment possible. True love is not selfish or possessive, the priest continued. Elena and Javier, who rest in peace, teach us from heaven that truly loving means desiring the other's happiness even when we are no longer physically present. They are not absent from the ceremony. Their spirits bless this union because genuine love transcends death. Miguel felt tears run down his face without being ashamed of them. When the time for vows came, his voice was firm and clear. Rosie, I promise to honor your strength, respect your dignity, and celebrate your kindness every day of my life. I promise to be your refuge when the world is cruel, your companion in joy and in pain, your most fervent admirer and your most constant support. When it was Rosa's turn, her voice was trembling, but her words came from the heart. Miguel, I promise to love you with the same dedication with which I have looked after this house for 15 years, but now with the freedom to express that love openly. I promise to honor Elena's memory by being the best version of myself, just as she would have wanted. I promise to give you my heart, which, although marked by scars from the past, is completely open for you. She paused, looking toward the sky before continuing. I promise that my love for you will not erase what Javier and I had, but will honor it by demonstrating that I am capable of loving deeply once more. And I promise to remind you every day that it's never too late for a second chance, that love has no age or perfect moment, only hearts willing to take a risk. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was soft, tender, full of promises of happy days to come. Jacaranda petals fell around them like purple snow, and Camilla applauded and cried at the same time, capturing the moment in photographs she would treasure forever. After the ceremony, there was an intimate meal in the mansion's dining room. Rosa had insisted on preparing some of the dishes herself, not as an employee, but as a bride who wanted to share her love through the food she made too. There was mole, tamales, rice pudding, all the flavors that told the story of her life, her struggles, her culture. During the toast, Camilla stood up, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her hand. "I want to say a few words about my mother," she began, her voice breaking with emotion. "When I was 4 years old, we lost my father. My mom was barely 23 years old, and suddenly she found herself alone, without money, with a little girl who depended entirely on her. Tears were running down her face now. During the next 25 years, I never saw my mother put herself first. Every sacrifice she made was for me. Every tear she shed in private was so that I wouldn't see her suffer. She worked until her hands bled. She walked miles under the burning sun. She went hungry so that I could eat." Rosa was crying openly now, moved by her daughter's words. "When I fell ill at 14, my mom knocked on more than 50 doors looking for help. And it was Doña Elena who opened one of those doors and changed our lives forever." Camila raised her glass toward the sky. "Doña Elena, wherever you are, thank you for saving my life and for giving my mother a home. And thank you for loving us enough to bless this love between Mom and Miguel." She turned toward Miguel with a smile. "Miguel, you didn't just marry my mother today. You gained a daughter who will love you for the rest of your life, for making the most extraordinary woman in the world happy." Miguel stood up and hugged Camilla tightly. "And I gained the daughter Elena and I could never have," he replied with an emotional voice. That afternoon, in the mansion garden under the jacarandas that had seen it all, 3 hearts joined in an improbable but perfect family. After the guests left, Miguel took Rosa back to the study, where everything had begun months ago. On the desk were Elena's 2 letters, now framed side by side under protective glass. "I want us to hang these letters in the main living room," Miguel said softly, "so we always remember that this love was born of kindness, of generosity, of Elena's genuine desire to see us happy." Rosa nodded, gently touching the frame with her fingers. She knew Miguel. She saw what we ourselves didn't dare admit. They turned to look at each other, now as husband and wife. "Did you ever imagine your life would end like this?" asked Miguel, hugging her from behind while looking through the window at the moonlit garden. "Never," admitted Rosa with a smile. "When I knocked on the door of this house 15 years ago, desperate and broken, I was only seeking to save my daughter. I never imagined I would find a home, a family, and eventually love again." She leaned into Miguel's chest, feeling his heart beat strong and steady. "Life is strange and wonderful," Rosa continued. "It takes away things we love. It breaks our heart. It makes us believe we will never be happy again. And just when we resign ourselves to solitude, it gives us a second chance so unexpected we almost don't recognize it." Miguel kissed her hair. Elena was right in her letter. Love doesn't diminish when shared. It multiplies. My love for her didn't disappear because I love you. Your love for Javier wasn't erased because you love me. All that love added up, expanded, became something larger. The two framed letters shone softly under the moonlight, silent witnesses of the love that unites not only two people, but four souls who loved each other enough to desire mutual happiness even beyond death. And there, in that colonial city of San Miguel de Allende, where the jacarandas bloom every spring, reminding everyone that beauty returns after winter, Rosa and Miguel proved that the best love stories are born of kindness, of gratitude, and of the courage to believe in second chances. Because true love never ends, it only transforms. And when two broken hearts find the courage to heal together, they create something more beautiful than either of them could have imagined alone. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late for a second chance at love. Rosa and Miguel teach us that the pain of the past does not define our future, that honoring those we love doesn't mean staying stuck, and that true love always finds a way to bloom. Even in the hearts we believed were closed forever, may God bless your path and grant you the courage to open yourself to love when it comes to your life, no matter how many times you have been hurt. Because every ending is also a new beginning full of infinite possibilities. Amen.